That night's journey was supposed to be easy. I was on my way to deliver goods to a small town. It wasn't a route I usually took, but the GPS on my phone was giving me clear directions. The road felt unusually quiet, almost too quiet. There were no other cars, only a row of trees on both sides of the road. The map showed I had to keep going straight for another 20 kilometers before the next turn. Light rain began to fall, making the road even more empty and silent. I turned on the wipers to clear the windshield from the light drizzle while tuning the radio to drown out the boredom. However, something didn't feel right. There were no houses, no streetlights, just darkness ahead and the forest lining both sides of the road. I tried to ignore it, hoping the trip would soon be over. After driving a few more kilometers, my GPS suddenly spoke. The calming voice I'd been used to now sounded confused. Recalculating route. I glanced at the phone screen. The map showed I needed to turn around, even though the road ahead was still straight and clear. I frowned. The map had changed, showing the road ahead abruptly ending, though I could clearly see it continuing right in front of me. I slowed down, trying to figure out what was going on. This is weird, I thought. Maybe the GPS signal was weak because I was in such a remote area, but the road still looked perfectly fine ahead. I refused to believe that the map could be right about a dead end on a road that seemed to stretch on for miles. The stillness of the night made me even more uneasy, but I chose to keep going. After a few more kilometers, the road began to change. What had been a smooth asphalt road turned narrower and unpaved, full of potholes and muddy patches. The rain, which had been light earlier, started to pour harder, making the road slippery. I glanced at the map again, and this time, it was completely blank. No road, no place names, just an empty screen with a flashing dead-end symbol. It was as if the road I was on no longer existed on the map. Fear began to creep in. I started wondering if I was lost. The forest on both sides of me seemed to close in, blocking out the sky. The hum of the truck's engine, which usually kept me calm, now felt too loud, and every rustling from the trees outside made me more uneasy. There wasn't a sign of life anywhere around, just the dense, overbearing forest. I stopped the truck at the side of the road, leaving the engine running. With shaky hands, I checked the map again, thinking about turning back before getting even more lost. But before I could decide, the headlights of the truck illuminated something in the distance. It was a small road sign up ahead. I drove forward, hoping the sign would give me directions to get back on the right track. Maybe I had just missed a turn. Maybe this was just an old rural road not updated on the map. As I got closer, a sense of relief washed over me. The small sign might just help me find the correct path. The rain started to ease up, and I took it as a good sign. But as I approached, I realized something was wrong. The sign was old, rusted, and barely readable. The writing on it had faded almost entirely. I slowed the truck down and looked around. Suddenly, I noticed a cluster of old houses on the side of the road, shrouded in darkness and silence. It was a small village that looked long abandoned. The windows of the houses were wide open, but no lights were on, no sign of life at all. The houses looked like they hadn't been lived in for years. I turned off the truck's engine and stared out the window, trying to figure out if this village was still inhabited or long forgotten. The map on my phone confirmed what I feared. This place wasn't on it. There was no village name, no route, as if this place had appeared out of nowhere. I started feeling extremely uncomfortable. The wind blew gently through the trees, carrying a rustling sound that seemed to come from nowhere. There were no night animals, no sound of water from the rain slowing down. Only an eerie silence that felt heavier by the second. The growing sense of fear made me turn around as quickly as I could. I fired up the engine, made a U-turn, and left that village as fast as I could. The road sign that I thought would help only led me to a place that wasn't supposed to exist. On the way back, I kept glancing at my rearview mirror, feeling like something was following me out of the darkness of that village. But there was nothing. Just the endless silence stretching out behind me. After that night, I never again took unfamiliar routes without double-checking my maps and directions. But every time I remember that village, one that shouldn't have existed on the map, I get chills, wondering what was really there, waiting for the lost to stumble upon it. I've been trucking for almost a decade now, and while there have been some odd moments on the road, nothing tops what happened to me one night in 2018. I was hauling a load across the Midwest, on a long stretch of highway that seemed to go on forever. It was the middle of the night, and fatigue was starting to creep in. I hadn't stopped for hours, and the highway was empty, with only my headlights cutting through the darkness. I figured I'd push on until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore, but the need for a break came sooner than expected. My eyes were getting heavy, and I knew I had to stop for a quick nap or a cup of coffee before I dozed off behind the wheel. I pulled off the highway at a rest stop I had never seen before. It looked run down, but the lights in the small gas station convenience store were on. I parked my truck and walked towards the building, expecting to grab an energy drink and hit the road again. But as soon as I opened the door, something felt off. The store was dimly lit, with a flickering neon sign above the counter. No one was inside, and the shelves were half empty. I called out, but there was no answer. Shrugging, I grabbed a drink from the cooler and walked towards the counter, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My skin prickled, but I kept telling myself it was just fatigue. As I was about to leave, I noticed movement in the reflection of the glass door. My heart skipped a beat. There was a man standing by my truck, staring at it. He was tall, with a ragged coat and scruffy beard, his face hidden under a baseball cap. At first I thought he might be a fellow traveler, but the way he stood there, unmoving, made me nervous. I walked outside, trying to act normal, but he didn't budge. He just stood there, staring at my truck, and then slowly turned his head towards me. "Need something?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer, just kept staring. Something about his eyes made my blood run cold. Trying to ignore the man, I climbed back into my truck, locked the doors, and turned on the engine. The man remained where he was, watching me. I told myself he was just some weirdo, maybe drunk or high, and I needed to get out of there. As I drove away, I kept checking my mirrors to make sure he wasn't following me. For a few miles, the road was empty, and I felt my nerves calming down. Maybe it was just my imagination running wild after hours of driving alone. But then, something in my rearview mirror caught my eye. Headlights. They were far behind at first, but gaining on me quickly. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my mind racing. The headlights belonged to a beat-up old car, the kind that looked like it barely ran. It swerved behind me, almost grazing the back of my trailer. The driver honked, flashing their lights, and I could see the same man from the rest stop behind the wheel. He was following me. I sped up, trying to shake him, but the car stayed on my tail, honking and flashing its lights again and again. I hit the gas, pushing my truck faster than I should have on that empty highway. The man continued to chase me for miles, until finally, I saw the lights of a state trooper in the distance. I floored it, hoping to catch the officer's attention. As soon as I got close, the man in the car swerved off the road, disappearing into the night. I pulled over, heart racing, and told the officer everything. But when they searched the area, they found nothing. The man and his car were gone. I didn't sleep that night, and to this day, I wonder what his intentions were and how long he had been watching me before I even noticed. Last year, I was driving through New Mexico, heading to a distribution center. The roads were long and isolated, the kind of highway where you don't see another vehicle for miles. It was around 2 a.m., and the dark desert stretched endlessly in every direction. The only light came from my headlights and the moon above. I had driven this road a few times before, but that night something felt different. The emptiness of the highway was more pronounced, almost eerie, but I shook it off. Just the usual late-night jitters, I figured. About an hour into the drive, my GPS started acting up. The signal was spotty, and it kept recalculating, though the road ahead of me was straight and clear. I ignored it, thinking it was just a service issue in such a remote area. But then the GPS showed something strange. It claimed the road ahead was blocked, a dead end. I slowed down, glancing out at the dark road. Everything looked normal, but according to the map, I shouldn't have been able to go any farther. I kept driving, determined to follow my instincts rather than the faulty GPS. After a few more miles, the road became rougher. It wasn't just potholes anymore. The pavement was cracked, and parts of it seemed to have eroded away. There were no signs warning of roadwork or closures, and the GPS map still insisted that I had reached a dead end. I considered turning back, but something in me wanted to keep going, just to see how far the road would take me. Eventually, I spotted something up ahead, a small, faded sign barely visible in the darkness. It looked like an old highway marker. Relieved, I drove toward it, thinking I must have just missed some signage earlier. As I got closer, though, I realized the sign was almost unreadable, covered in dirt and rust. It hadn't been maintained in years. The road stretched on, but something about it felt wrong. The air was thick with a sense of unease, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't supposed to be there. Then I saw it, an old car, abandoned on the side of the road. Its doors were open, and it looked like it had been sitting there for years. I slowed to a stop, peering out at the scene, wondering if anyone was nearby. That's when I noticed something worse. Footprints in the sand leading away from the car, disappearing into the desert. I didn't wait around to find out who or what had left the car there. I hit the gas and sped down the highway, hoping to put as much distance between me and that spot as possible. The road finally smoothed out, and I made it to the distribution center without further incident. When I told one of the workers about the abandoned car, he just shrugged. "That highway's been closed for years," he said. "No one should be out there. I haven't driven that route since, and I don't plan to. Whatever had happened out there in the desert was something I didn't want to uncover."